All right, let's jump back in. Middle of page 6. So from her experience, people have a realm of control of when they're going to pass, and they're each going to pass in their own way, in their own time. And she gives some thoughts here that I thought were good. Bottom of page 6, that last paragraph, a very private person may want to die alone. They may not want a crowd of people in the room with them. Top of page 7, as with childbirth, death often comes during the night, so that can take place. Not everybody has to stay up. She makes suggestions on how people can be there and check in and do shifts and so forth. Second paragraph, a protective parent often dies without their children in the room because they don't want their children to go through it. They will wait until they're alone, and then they'll pass on. Third paragraph, restlessness can be from a lack of oxygen, but more likely it is from fear. Some people are really restless in that last period of time. We are all going to be afraid to some degree as we approach death. In Jesus' name, I discount myself from that statement. I don't want any fear. That's my goal. Now, it's by faith, so I say goal. But I am not going to agree with, well, yeah, I know I'm going to be afraid. I don't want to be afraid at all. That's not what Jesus came to die for. The last 3 sentences of that paragraph, soft-voiced reassurance that all is as it should be, that nothing bad is happening, and that they are safe is helpful in addressing fear. If they're saved, I agree. If they're unsaved, I disagree. I don't want to speak softly to someone who's going to hell and say, everything's going to be fine. Just leave. No, I want to get them saved. So, again, I qualify that. Severe agitation can be treated with medication, and she talks about some of those things there. Top of page 8, unfinished business is a very important component to the length of labor. We already addressed that, the bottom 4 lines there of that paragraph. As the doula or the person leading this, we generally don't have to address the hidden issues with family or whatever. They will come forward on their own. So if you're in a situation where someone is passing and you're there kind of helping this along, don't look and say, I don't understand why it's taking them so long. George, didn't you have issues? Did you ever clean that up? Don't do that. There's ways of saying it, or kind of just just pray the Holy Spirit brings it to the front and let the things be addressed on their own, because you can start a massive blowout fight right there on the spot, and that's not the best way to go. Comfort care. In the hours and minutes before physical death or before death, physical care of the body is still important, but our focus moves from fixing the patient to keeping them comfortable, and I add to help them move on. And she just talks about a lot of different things about the body, and they lose control of their bladder and their stools and the use of diapers and catheters, and she talks about a lot of things there in page 9 and 10. Glycerin swabs or mouthwash to help keep them, because your mouth dries out, especially if they're using oxygen. And there's a lot of really good common sense stuff there that can be helpful. And she deals with that, page 9, 10, 11, 12. She deals with it. Some good, again, common sense things is like page 11, the 3rd paragraph down. Because the dying person is non-responsive, or if they're non-responsive, you may have to change how you give the medicine, because usually they'll give some kind of medicine that blocks pain or any kind of discomfort. If they're non-responsive, and this may sound goofy, but the 5th line down, it's like, well, yeah, I could see people doing that. Do not put a regular pill in their mouth unless it is a special pill made to dissolve under their tongue. Unless you want to help kill them, Don't put something like that in a non-responsive person's mouth, because they could choke to death on it. Just simple, common sense, pain management, keep them comfortable, help them leave as comfortable as possible. At this point, we're not worried about getting them their whatever medications were for Well, you know, they get loopy a little bit if they don't take this medication. Just let it go. It's kind of her thoughts. Just keep them comfortable. They're leaving. We're not trying to fix them anymore. We're trying to help them pass. Page 13, number 5, keep it simple. When you're talking to them, this whole thing is also very good. When you're talking to them, keep it simple, because they're shutting down. Their brain is shutting down. They're detaching. They might have a hard time focusing, concentrating, remembering. Just keep it simple and repeat, repeat, repeat. You know, you just realize you may have to, well, what did you say was happening now? Okay, go over it again. And it might be 5 minutes later. So, okay, so now what are we doing now? Go over it again. That's normal. They're shutting down. It's okay. We're trying to help them leave comfortably and peaceably. She uses the example there on page 13 of driving a car, and they're the operator, and they're slowly getting out of the driver's seat and going to leave the vehicle. And she uses that to kind of explain to them this is what's happening. Bottom of page 13. This time before death is used to neutralize the fear associated with dying and death. Our calming presence, our simple ideas, our supportive guidance for each other all affects this 11th hour. So not only for the person, but also for other people who are there. Then number 6, on page 14, what's it like to die? The key to getting out of the body is to relax. They've discovered that in the medical world. If a person will relax, they leave quicker. Well, for a believer, it's like, duh. The more peaceful, the more at rest we are, just leave. You don't have to hang around. Don't let the body decide when you're going. You decide when you're going. But that's a different message. We'll talk about that later in talking about dying stuff. Relax and we can release easily. The Lord told Mary something as she was helping this man that we saw, as he was a new believer, hadn't been saved long, was afraid of dying. It's too late to teach him much about anything. And she was praying, Lord, what do I say to him? And she said, I don't remember how it laid out, but she said the Lord very plainly told her. I can't remember if it was just when she woke up or how it laid out. But he said, the Lord told her, he said, my people don't die, they let go. And she thought, that's good. I'm going to use that with him. Now, interestingly enough, here this lady, she says the same thing. Relax and we can release easily. Just let go. Just release your grip. Let go and get out. So she talks about what it's like to die from, and what she's gleaning from. She says it in there. What she's gleaning from is people who've died and who've been either resuscitated, been pronounced dead, ended up getting resuscitated or came back or whatever. She says there's millions of after or near-death experiences. It says that on page 16, third paragraph, second or third paragraph down, however you want to call it. There are millions of people in the United States who have had near-death experiences, people who have been pronounced clinically dead and have come back and recounted the above experiences. Those experiences are telling us what it's like to die. So she's gonna, she goes through a list here, and we'll start over on page 15. She's gathered information from people who've died and come back. And okay, let's talk about this. What was it like to die? So that's where this information's coming from. Now, the one point I want to point out is at the bottom of page 14, top of page 15. I disagree with this point. If the person acting as the doula is not a family member, like you're representing the church or whatever, then I must mention that our task is not to save or convert to any particular belief, but to bring comfort. Garbage. Garbage. My job as a representative, as an ambassador of Jesus Christ, is the ministry of reconciliation, and if it's with your last breath we get you in, we got you in. Yep. So I don't agree with that. But I know where she's coming from, because if you've got the wrong people there who believe in who knows what, and you start talking Jesus, you can have a full-blown feud break out. So what do? Pray that God provides a time or a way you can do it in a manner that's not going to disrupt the whole family. But do it. That's where I'm coming from. So she says, second paragraph, it's not appropriate to share spiritual ideas. We're only to support. Well, you're going to the spirit realm. It would be nice to have some spiritual ideas. But she's coming from atheists and agnostics, and she mentions it there. So she's trying to keep a family fight from breaking out right at the last moments, which makes sense. But I wouldn't do it that way. I'd find a time or a place, ask God to provide a way that everybody clears the room and you've got 5 minutes to say, let me lead you to Jesus. And you get the job done before they leave. Middle of the page, with everyone gathered around the bed, so now she's talking about dying. What's it like to die? If the person is non-responsive, and that's bold, so this is important in how she's approaching this, take the dying person's hand, gently stroke it. You're getting the driver of the car, you're getting their attention. Begin talking by stating who you are. Again, they're probably confused, losing clarity. Tell them you are dying. Tell them to relax. Be like a log flowing downstream. Just let go, just release. Tell them you're doing a good job. Everyone here understands that you have to leave. We'll miss you, but it's okay. You need to go. And on top of page 16, you are not alone. Others who have died before you are here to help you and guide you. There may be a spiritual presence. Ask for help, and help will present itself. That's absolutely true. There's a lot of stories of people who've passed on who come and get their loved ones. I could go over 3, 4 of them right off the top of my hat, where people are just at that I'm leaving point. And, oh, Mom, you look different than you looked before. Wow, Dad's here too. And they're seeing in the spirit realm, and they'll say something like, they're just telling me to just come. Should I go? And boop, they're gone. So it can happen. They can communicate with the spirit realm. Yeah, I'll save that story for the message. Got to keep moving. So part of the experience is to tell them to look for God's light, to look toward the light, and to move toward it, and don't be afraid if people you recognize have come to get you, things like that. It's all good. She talks about the average person, bottom of page 16, the crowning signal that the birthing into the other world is just about to take place is a facial grimace. It's like a look of pain on the face. For the average person, that might be right. I don't know what the grimace would be there for. If it's there for anything other than what Scripture says it should be there for, I'm not going to believe for a grimace at the end. But evidently, most people have that look in their face of like a grimace or a pain. Their breathing has become slow. They might be into fish breathing. Movement can change. She just gives different signals of how it's happening. At the bottom of page 17, when they've passed, when they're gone. Those bottom 2 paragraphs, she describes leaving and they're gone, and gives some practical advice there. I think it's really good. You can read it. Page 18, after death, now what? Here she just kind of walks you through some interesting stuff, and I'm not going to read much of this because she brings some things up that we do need to touch, but I'm not going to read through it. The first part there, she talks about give everybody a chance to come to grips with what just happened. The person just passed, especially if they're in the hospital or at home in a bed, something like that. Help them to know what to do next. Now, middle of the page, it says if the body's not clean. So if you're not in a hospital, you're at home, and you're the doula, or you're the person in charge of helping them lead through this, she talks about cleaning the person up, giving them a bath, doing the whole thing that they used to do years ago when we did not have medical help. She talks about that, and evidently it's fairly common, and I learned some things as we go on here that it's like, really, I didn't even know we could do that. So she talks about cleaning them up. before the family members come in and say goodbye or whatever, make sure the top of page 19, after the body is clean and dry, talks about dressing them and things like that. Let the family members, third paragraph down, come in and say their goodbyes. She says, fourth paragraph, because we don't know exactly when they left or are they still lingering, encourage them to spend time alone and speak of things out loud that maybe they didn't feel like they could say before, because they may still be there listening. They may not have left yet. She might be right on that. I don't know. If anyone's uncomfortable, top of page 20, being in the room alone, have someone with them. Okay, so now here is where we jump in and we've got to touch a couple things. We need to follow state protocol, top of page 20, first full paragraph there, for reporting a death. State regulations differ, so get the information before you need it. Some states just require the services of a hospice or a care professional to pronounce death. Some require the presence of a coroner. If you call 911, the paramedics will try to resuscitate the deceased unless you have an official do not resuscitate from form that is signed and present. So, well, let's just read on. It is the paramedic's job to resuscitate, and in some cases they may even be successful. However, they still cannot fix the life-threatening disease that the person died from, which could be just old age. In the first place, death will just come again in a short period of time. And the chaos of the attempted resuscitation effort is not something you want. So calling 911 goes against everything we are trying to achieve with regard to a peaceful, normal death. That's good advice. I mean, if we're trying to walk them out from this world to the next and they finally leave, don't call 911, because they're going to come and try to bring them back. That's their job. That's what they're supposed to do. So I think it's really good. Page 20, call anyone who may want to come to the house and say their goodbyes, and so forth. Top of page 21. In most states, it's illegal to care. It is legal. I want to make sure I said legal. It is legal to care for your own dead at home. I didn't know that was still the case. What this means is that families, without the help of a professional funeral director, create and direct the funerals themselves. The body stays at home under the loving care of family and friends. This needs to be planned before they die. While waiting for the funeral home to arrive, if you go that direction, call the primary doctor, tell them what happened. If the family is using a licensed funeral director, begin talking about visitation, funeral plans, and so forth. And then she talks about that for a bit. And then she also talks about, if you're not going to use a funeral director, if you're not going to go the professional route, she talks about getting them ready to be viewed. Let me find the exact spot here. It's someplace in these last pages, and I jumped off of that, so I went to the Minnesota State law thing to see what is legal in Minnesota, like the top of page 21. In most states, it's legal to care for your own dead at home. Okay, so in Minnesota, we do not have the authority to pronounce someone dead. We can say they've died, but you've got to have someone with authority to pronounce that. It can be a physician, an advanced practice registered nurse, a physician assistant. But for them to pronounce the death, according to the law, they needed to be there when they died. For those three, a physician or a nurse, which I find kind of interesting, because if someone died at home, you call 911, they try to resuscitate them. They're dead all the way to the hospital. It might be 30 minutes later they get to the hospital. They're pronounced dead by the doctor at the hospital, where in reality they probably were out of their body an hour earlier. But they can't do that because they weren't there. They can only pronounce death. They're there, okay? But now a coroner or a medical examiner can pronounce the death without having been there. So you can bypass the thing of, well, the doctor's got to do it and this, that, and the other. So now let me read on. If you are interested, Minnesota home funeral laws, and you can look these up. I just Googled it and found for Minnesota and it brought it up. If you're interested in holding a home funeral for a loved one who has died, you'll need to be aware of the laws that apply. Here's an overview of the rules that govern home funerals in Minnesota. Do you need a funeral director in Minnesota? In all states, it is legal to have your loved one's body at home after they die. Minnesota does not require you involve a licensed funeral director in making or carrying out any final arrangements. Who's in charge of body disposition and funeral arrangements? Minnesota law determines who has the right to make the final decisions about a person's body and funeral services. The right goes first to a person named by the deceased before death, after that to family members in an established order. Must the body be embalmed? In Minnesota, a body must be embalmed, refrigerated, or packed in dry ice if it will be transported by public transit. Final disposition cannot happen within 72 hours after death, so 3 days. If the body is to be viewed publicly by anyone other than the family, or if the Commissioner of Health orders it. Refrigeration or dry ice can usually preserve a body for a short time. Minnesota law states the body cannot be held in refrigeration longer than 6 days or packed in dry ice longer than 4 days from the time it has been released from the place of death or from the coroner. So once the coroner says they're dead, you got to have someone officially who can sign the death certificate. It can't be us. It has to be an official person. Once they do that, you've got 4 to 6 days. Don't even have to go to the funeral home. You can do that whole thing yourself. Now, I didn't know that. So you get the funeral director or the coroner or someone to do the death certificate. If you want to transport the body, and this I'll just read it. I'm not trying to be insensitive here. I'm just reading what it says. Getting permits to transport and dispose of the body. That's what it says. So. In Minnesota, you must obtain a certificate of removal from the Department of Health before moving a body from the place of death and before final disposition. For example, if someone dies outside the home, this authorization would be necessary to bring the body home for the final care. If someone dies at home, you want to move them elsewhere. I'll just read it. If someone dies at home, permission is necessary to move the body to a location away from the home for burial or cremation. When the body's being transported, they give the different rules that it needs to have. The vehicle to transport, etc. In addition to the certificate of removal, you need to obtain a permit and etc. Okay? So now in that permit, they ask if you want to bury them, entomb them, cremate them, or alkaline hydrolysis. It's like, okay, so what's that? So I read on. So you got to get permits for this so that the state knows what you're doing. Can you bury a body at home? Minnesota allows any private person and any religious corporation to establish a cemetery on their own private property. I didn't know that. To do so, you must have the land surveyed and a plat recorded with the deed in the county recorder's office. Before burying a body on private land, you should check with the county or town clerk for any zoning laws you must follow. So you can actually bury them on your own property in Minnesota. It might be hard for resale. I mean, if you ever plan to sell them, oh, that's grandma and that's grandpa. And they come with the property, you know, kind of thing. But it's possible. You can do it. I mean, if you're like on a farm or a rural setting and the property is going to be in the family line for generations to come, you can pick a spot in the corner of your 40 and get it laid out and surveyed, and there's where everybody's going to lay. I didn't know that. What about cremation? You have to have a professional do it. If you don't want to use a funeral director, make sure the crematory is willing to accept the body directly from the family so you can transport them there, as long as you got your permit. In Minnesota, the coroner or medical examiner must grant permission before the body can be cremated, but there are no laws restricting the disposition of the ashes, so you can do whatever you want to do with the ashes. Alkaline hydrolysis in Minnesota. Never heard of this before. If I did, I forgot about it. So here we go. Minnesota is one of the very few states with alkaline hydrolysis facilities that are available to the public, sometimes referred to as green cremation or biocremation. Alkaline hydrolysis uses water, an alkaline solution, pressure, and heat to speed up the body's decomposition, resulting in a small amount of liquid separated from bone fragments that resemble cremated remains. By law, as with flame-based cremation, a coroner or medical examiner must provide authorization before the body can undergo this. It doesn't say anything about a professional having to do it. So if you're going to do it, I would check and make sure that it's even legal. But it sounds like Minnesota's really got some interesting laws here. It's like, well, cool. With that all in mind, now we've got what she talked about there on the top of page 21. It's legal for you to care for your dead at home. She talks how you can do that. And of course, in Minnesota, we got to get someone to actually pronounce the person legally dead so they can sign the death certificate. But then she goes through all kinds of things of washing them, cleaning them, presenting them, getting them ready for viewing, and on and on and on. It kind of reminds me of what my dad explained to me, how it happened before funeral directors and funeral homes came to be. That's how they did it. He was taught and how to do it. He said, I never liked it. He said, but I've been around when it's being done. You know, you wash the body up, you clean it up. They'd usually lay it out on the kitchen table in the parlor. He said that's what a parlor was for. He said you'd put quarters or something on the eyes, so as the body cooled, the eyes would stay shut. And how you dress them and the whole thing. So that's how they did it. You know, not that long ago, all the way back in history, they didn't have funeral directors. So Minnesota's nice enough to let us do that. Some states don't let you do that. So if you're into that kind of thing, there you go. Personally, I have my faith set on enough money to get a professional. I'm going to hire somebody to do this. And no, the church does not have a cemetery at this point. Oh, I have no idea. You offering your property? So we could, according to state law, we could do that. Okay, so real briefly, this is a really good booklet, but it's so simple, so self-explanatory. It kind of just walks you through the death process and how it plays out for the average person. 1 to 3 months prior to death, they start withdrawing. That's on page 2. She explains that. Food, they start stopping eating because they're dying. Their digestion quits, so they're not hungry. They don't want to eat. She recommends don't force feed them. You know, this is normal. Let them die. Page 5, disorientation. That can be 1 to 2 weeks prior to death. And then she talks about physical changes, breathing changes. Page 8, 1 to 2 days up to just hours before they die. Now this is interesting on top of page 8. I didn't know this. Sometimes there's a surge of energy and they come out of their kind of slumber or their just kind of passing on, and they're alert, they're awake, they want to eat, they want to do things, they want to whatever. That can happen right before they pass, a day or two. Her explanation is the spirit is receiving the surge of you're about to leave, and the spirit knows it. And it reflects out in the physical body it mirrors out just for a little bit of time. And sometimes people misunderstand that as, oh, they're getting well. No, actually, they're just getting ready to step out. And she believes they're sensing their spirit. It's like has received the, how you want to say it, the energy or the go-ahead. And the spirit goes, woohoo! And their body mirrors that for a day or two, and then they pass. And she just talks about, different physical things that happen. Again, on page 10, she talks about fear and unfinished business, the two bigger factors determining resistance to passing on. It's really good. It's a summary, and it's really good. Puts it in really good terms on what to look for and how to look for it. So hopefully that helps us with some really common sense things and so forth, and helping people pass. Was there